Jermod McCoy answered some big questions about his health with an impressive pro day. D'Angelo Pons joins the list of impressive cornerback athletes in this draft. And how does that impact the Bengals' plans? Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. He's James Rapien, I'm Jake Liscow, and today we are talking cornerbacks, specifically a couple of cornerbacks that have tested in the last couple of days at their respective pro days. Jerma McCoy really stands out, and we selected him in our mock draft Monday this week on the presumption that he would be able to work out at his pro day, and work out he did, and impress he did. That's where we're going to start the show as we discuss the many options for the Bengals at cornerback, in my opinion, really seemingly from rounds 1 to round 4. And we'll get into this, of course, in more depth with some scouting report notes on each of these players and each of the targets that the Bengals will have on days 1, 2, 3 of the draft in the future. But today we're going to be talking about some of the more recent news that has emerged among corners and some of the trends we're noticing around cornerbacks and where they will be drafted in 2026. And James, Jerma McCoy is where we start. And we alluded to this yesterday as well. He impressed at his pro day. He ran a 40. He did some jumps, didn't do agilities, but nobody really does agilities anymore. So it's hard to be critical of anyone really at this point in the process and single anyone out for not doing agility tests because hardly anyone seems to run the 3-cone in the short shuttle anymore. But a really good number for Jerma McCoy in the 40 and really impressive jumps as well that seem to indicate that he is a high-end athlete to go along with the high-end tape before he had the ACL injury.
Yeah, 4.38 unofficial, 40-yard dash, 38-inch vertical, and 10-foot 7-inch broad jump. I mean, checkbox. If you look at the relative athletic score, what would it be if all those things come true as official? You're talking about a 95th percentile athlete. You're talking about an elite athlete at the cornerback position. And you're right, he didn't do the agility, but you know what he did do? Put out great tape in 2024. And I think that's what you and I both were very much aware of ahead of that pro day. It was kind of weird at the combine that he didn't do anything and he talked and it just felt, what's going on? And for him to come out and answer the questions about his health, essentially, like this, it's great because one, you get all the medical info you could usually need unless there's a follow-up or another question at the combine. You really are able to look at these guys and for a medical standpoint, that's where the combine started. And that's a huge part of it. And then he goes to the pro day and performs like this. Jermod McCoy is very much a contender to be the 10th overall pick. And that's something that I think I'm wrapping my head around still as we sit here, as we record 22 days from the first round of the NFL draft. Like Jermod McCoy, him being the pick, it is a bit odd, right? For some people, I think they're going to see the ACL and him coming back from that and missing 2025. But that tape in 24, the pro day performance showing that he still has the speed, still has that explosion. I think there are going to be a lot of NFL teams that are in on Jermod McCoy. I wouldn't be shocked at all if he's a top 15 pick, maybe even top 10 pick, maybe even the top corner taken, certainly in play at number 10.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the NFL parses it between Mansour Delane, who is also pretty good, pretty exceptional, really good, and played last year, didn't have the injury, also ran well at his pro day, and Jermod McCoy. And shout out to our Locked On Bengals everydayer discussion on Discord, where just this morning there was a back and forth that emerged that was being discussed around like, man, I'm not picking anyone this hurt. Caleb Banks, Jermod McCoy off the board for one of our subscribers. And then, and then discussion ensued. So you're not wrong when you say like some people are going to look at that ACL and be like, oh, really? Yeah. Yep. And there will be people, especially on the outside. And my thoughts around that are the same as they are for pretty much every injury flag for a prospect. It's impossible for us to know on the outside. We know he had an ACL injury, but we also know Caleb Banks was flagged apparently by some teams for a knee that was immediately shouted down by his representation, but that came from somewhere. And I'm sure different NFL teams see it in different ways, but there's some smoke around Caleb Banks Caleb Downs and the knee.
Yeah.
Caleb Banks
Okay.
has the foot, obviously, that we know about quite well. But Caleb Downs was what I was trying to invoke there. And then, like I said, it was quickly shouted down by Downs camp and Downs, I think, family. I think his dad was involved with some of that. But
well, real quick, just on Downs,
yeah.
I think that knee is so bad that they can't take him in the first 9. I think he has to be available at 10, and the Bengals can make the decision from there.
Yeah, there's a number of guys you just can't pick with a single-digit pick because of various outliers. David Bailey's too old. Arvell Reese doesn't have a position. You can't pick those guys in the top 9, obviously. And you got the Ruben
Sonny
Bain
Styles.
arm length.
What
You're picking a
what
linebacker
guy named Sonny? No, yes, Sonny. Sonny can't be a good football player.
Well, shout out to my grandfather who went by Sonny and was a great athlete in the state of Ohio. He I think was like a state track record holder for some period of time in his youth.
I said football player.
Yeah, I'm just saying that Sonnies can be great athletes. Okay.
Yeah, maybe if they get picked 10, not 9.
That's right. That's right.
9.
That's right. All right. We've gone far enough with this shtick. The point is that I was trying to get to was from the outside looking in, like, yeah, we can know vaguely that there's some injury stuff going on. But most of us that are observing this sport from the outside looking in are not medical doctors. I know that we have medical doctors listening to this show that are like, but I'm a doctor, so I'm not saying none of us. Some of you are probably orthopedic surgeons or something that have expertise around these sorts of injuries. Kudos to you. Most of us are not those people. The people in the Bengals front office are not those people. They're relying on medical doctors for information about these injuries, for prognostic information about how they think the recovery and longevity for these injuries will play out for these players. And that's up to every team to decide what the risk is, what the upside is, how much they think that's going to impact the player in the short term and the long term. And so it's really hard for anyone from the outside to really weigh that properly.
Yeah.
And to consider that properly. So what you can consider is what he did. He showed that he can still run. He showed that he can still jump. He went through some positional drills, and that'll be up to NFL teams, right, to determine, what they saw, because very limited video got out of Jermod McCoy's pro day. You could see him in the back pedal flipping his hips in one drill. But from the outside looking in, my position on injury stuff is always that it's a risk factor that teams consider, and you weigh against what you think that player can do and how you think that injury will affect him. And that's for every NFL team to decide.
Yeah. And the teams will get all of that footage as well, see how he moves, all of those things. If the Bengals have any questions about McCoy's health, they will bring him in for a top 30. I promise. Like, if they're interested in him, and I don't know why they wouldn't be, right? I think from a prospect standpoint, there's a lot of reasons why you would like him as a player if he's healthy. If they have any questions, they'll bring him in, and that'll be it. Otherwise, maybe he answered all of those questions at the combine. Maybe they still bring him in for a top 30 visit because they want to hang out with him and get to know him and all of those things. Like, all factors that you want. You want to know what makes a guy tick a little bit and how hungry they are, how much they love football, all of those things. And certainly if they're named Sonny, but all those guys we mentioned, they can't go in the top 9. They got to start at 10, and McCoy is one of those guys. But I will say this, there is a scenario that we haven't really discussed in the top 9, which impacts 10, that I think we should get to, because it involves Sonny Styles and David Bailey and all of these guys, and certainly Jermod McCoy and Mansour Delane. So we'll do that coming up next. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is America's #1 sports book. And let's be honest, ladies and gentlemen, the tournament, it's almost over. And whether you're like me and you picked Bengals fan Dan Hurley and the UConn Huskies to win it all, or maybe you think it's going to be Arizona, maybe you think it's going to be Illinois, maybe you think that it's, and Illinois would be oh my, would it be a shock? And then obviously there's Michigan as well. Maybe your Dak Chris Jenkins Jr. It doesn't matter. Regardless of who you think, who you're rooting for, FanDuel is here for you as America's #1 sports book, giving new customers a way to stay in the action all tournament long. Even if your bracket is busted, you get up to $300 back in bonus bets every day for 10 days, 10 chances to stay involved throughout the tournament. Game picks, futures, even same game parlays. All you have to do is go to FanDuel.com. That is FanDuel.com to sign up today. FanDuel.com. Hey, Jake, let's dive into this possibility. What if not one, but two cornerbacks go in the top 9? Kansas City needs a corner. Right now, I'm not sure they could cover you. And so they certainly need cornerback help. So Kansas City takes one, and one of these other teams take one, and suddenly Delane and McCoy are off the board. And all these defensive players we've been talking about, Ruben Bain and David Bailey and Sonny Styles and Caleb Downs, it would almost not guarantee numbers-wise, math-wise, but it would make it pretty close to a certainty that one of those guys makes it to you at 10.
Well, I think one of them, if you include the corners, will be there at 10, right? And so that's where I think we expand from those 5 defensive players that we've talked about to 7, and you include the corners in the conversation. And we're going to go through this exercise both on this podcast and elsewhere, where we're going to try to come up with the board as we think the Bengals see it, the most likely possibilities. That could be an episode that you hear from us tomorrow on Locked On Bengals, trying to figure out who the most likely picks are. But I wonder what it would look like in the world that Caleb Downs and Ruben Bain are both available to the Bengals at pick number 10, which is possible with both of those guys having some question marks. And I know that I looked at our comments. I don't remember when it was. And we'd passed on Caleb Downs maybe, or we were talking about not picking Caleb Downs. We were talking about alternatives to Caleb Downs when he was available to us in a mock somewhere, I think. And the comments were pretty unanimously like, you just pick Caleb Downs, you don't think about it. And I don't know how many of those people are also Ohio State fans. We know there's a lot of overlap, right, with Ohio State and the Bengals fan base, but there's a world where Downs makes it to 10 because he's a safety who doesn't appear to have top-end athletic traits and didn't test to try to show teams that he actually does have top-end athletic traits. Because if he has that kind of tape and then he goes out there and tests like Nicky Manwari, then I think that the questions that might exist around his athleticism on tape, where he's thought to be a good, not great athlete, essentially, and has good instincts, but can't always and I've seen this in scouting reports written about Downs, like has great instincts, but can't always get his body to cooperate and execute on the plan that he knows needs to happen, right? Because he's not got the elite athletic tools. So if he makes it to 10 because he's got good, not great size, good, not great athleticism, and he plays safety, which we have seen fall in the draft routinely. And then Ruben Bain falls because guys like Gerard McCoy
built the show. Jermod.
No, different. The former defensive tackle. Now you're confusing me. That's not fair. Is accurately representing NFL defensive.
You're talking about Gerald McCoy.
Gerald McCoy
with a G.
Yeah.
Just to be clear.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm just making it clear. That's all.
I was talking about defensive line coaches having serious questions about the arm length. And that's going to be a thing for Ruben Bain. And so there is a world where both of those guys fall because offensive tackles and cornerbacks and wide receivers and Jeremiah Love and maybe Ty Simpson
who
get picked in the top 10. And then the Bengals have to make that choice, which, we're focused on corners today, but with Jermod McCoy and Mansour Delane, both of those guys testing well and having good tape, they could both be in the top 10. Now, there was a really good point I just want to quickly touch on with Mansour Delane from Ben Fennell, that a corner that is under 6 foot, under 190 pounds, under 30-inch arms. Pretty questionable to see that kind of player go in the top 10 historically. And so there's another size outlier there to go along with Ruben Bain and Mansour Delane.
Yeah, I think That's why I wouldn't be shocked one bit. Not just that, but I would not be shocked one bit if Jermod McCoy was the guy. Not Gerald McCoy, the defensive tackle, but Jermod McCoy, the corner, to be clear.
Too many
and
McCoys.
went in the top 9 or top 10, however you want to phrase it. But I think
because McCoy does have the size. He's
no
21 years old, 6 foot, 200 pounds, you know.
And I think that's why when I go back to the tape, I think there are going to be teams that look at it and they're like, man, check box. It feels very Derek Stingley 2022, was it? With Sauce Gardner? Like it does, where Sauce is getting a lot of attention, was awesome at UC. Delane's getting attention right now. Obviously, they're way different builds and all of those things. But you may look up and the SEC guy may have, or the one SEC guy, I guess they're both SEC with Delane, but McCoy may end up getting that and taking the title of number 1 corner taken. Maybe not. Maybe the injury is part of it. Maybe there's other concerns that we don't know about. But this is Locked On Bengals. And when I look at 10 and pick 10, and I think about everybody that everybody's talking about, all these guys, like if David Bailey's there at 10, that's a lot of fun, right? That feels pretty darn good. Even if it is unlikely, one of those guys, maybe 2 of those guys, it feels like are going to be there, and the Bengals should get. I feel as confident as ever that they should get, if they want a high-end defender, there will be a high-end defender available at 10. And obviously defense is where we've been focused. Maybe it's a weird draft and it goes a different way, but you look at it with Downs, with Bain, I agree. I think the NFL looks at those guys at least a little differently. And when you say it out loud with McCoy, it's like, oh, well, you just said it, 6 foot, 200, great tape, had an ACL, injuries happen in the league. He's fully healthy, no red flags. That feels pretty clean. And if Caleb Downs, if there's questions about, how he's going to be at that nickel spot in the NFL, which is much different. I watched Jesse Bates get roasted one-on-one in one-on-ones in training camp. And he's a really high-end safety because it's different when you're in there in that cornerback spot one-on-one guarding Tyler Boyd or guarding insert whoever. And so that could be a factor. But come back to it, I think the Bengals are going to get a really, really good player at 10, or at least they should. They should be in position to get one of these guys. And if it's McCoy, I think there's a lot of reasons to be excited about it. If it's Downs or Bain or whoever else we're going to talk about on our next show, well, guess what? There's a reason we've been talking about those guys for months.
Might need to double check on Jermod McCoy's weight. It looks like at the combine he was 188. I don't know that he weighed in at his pro day. He was listed at 195. Was where the 195, 200. I rounded up to 200. So he might be 6 foot and a half inch, 188. Has longer arms than Mansford Lane. But maybe not quite 200.
188 to 193 is kind of the range I'm seeing.
Okay.
77-inch wingspan. So, yeah. So
certainly a little bit more length than Delane, and was better younger than Delane. Delane's a little bit older coming out. And it's a really deep corner class as well. There was some talk about Avion Terrell, from Clemson, being a potential top half of the first round pick from Clemson. His hamstring flared up at his pro day where he wasn't able to complete his workout. That could end up pushing him down into the second round. Colton Hood has perhaps worked his way into the back of the first round. The other corner from Tennessee, you could see 2 Tennessee corners picked in the first round. And Chris Johnson, D'Angelo Pons, who tested on Wednesday at his pro day, ran a 40-yard dash. I think he had previously done some jumps at the combine. Looks like a very special athlete as well. So we'll talk about some of these other guys where Terrell could make it into the second round. Chris Johnson, certainly a fascinating name if he's available to the Bengals in the second round. And D'Angelo Pons, this size outlier. So many of these size outlier kind of players in this draft for us to talk about as we continue to discuss the corner options for the Bengals as some pro day numbers have come in. Coming up next.
What if sports were traded like markets? Now you can put your sports IQ to work in real time with Robinhood Prediction Market. It's not you against the house. It's you participating in a live market. You can buy or sell positions live all game long. Use your sports knowledge in the moments that matter. Robinhood prediction markets changes the game. It's people moving the action. So when momentum shifts, you can move with it. You always knew the game, but never had a dynamic way to apply that knowledge. Now you can actually take part live in a market powered by people. You're no longer just a spectator. Play-by-play, you decide. Trade every play with Robinhood, now available across U.S. Download the Robinhood app now to begin. Again, that's the Robinhood app. Futures and cleared swaps trading involves significant risk and is not appropriate for everyone. Event contracts are offered by Robinhood Derivatives, LLC, a registered futures commission merchant and swap firm.
Many corners in the early part of this draft, especially when you get to day 2, James, are very interesting prospects for the Bengals. If Avion Terrell from Clemson falls to the second round to the Bengals, I think that's the guy that you would consider picking. Colton Hood, certainly I don't expect him to make it to 41. I think he is probably in the first round at this point, but Chris Johnson from San Diego State, another guy we've talked about, and D'Angelo Ponce is the most fascinating to me out of all of these because the tape is awesome. The testing is awesome. He's rocked up. We just talked about the 188 pound to 193 pound range for Jermod McCoy. Ponce is 182, according to the numbers that I have in front of me at 5'8". He's like 3.5 inches shorter, 4 inches shorter, and only a few pounds lighter. So some density to the young man out of Indiana. And he played outside at 5'8.5" at Indiana and played outside at a high level. And then he just went out there and ran a 4.3. That initial numbers that I saw were around a 4.3 mark in the 40.
Yeah, 4.25 unofficially on one of his runs. 4.28 was another one I saw. Let's just say it's 4.31. Let's just go low. Playmaker, guy that despite his size has overcome that. Is you're right. Special athlete is the way to describe it. If he runs a 4.4 at that size, you're like, okay, it's fine. But this is flying. And you look at it, what did Mike Sandrestro run? I'm going to look it up right now just to see, because this is kind of like the Mike Sandrestro ran a 4.47 40-yard dash. And this is the guy that comes to mind, the former Michigan corner. He was named Mike. Everyone compared him to Mike Hilton. D'Angelo Ponce ran it way faster than, like, that's the difference between a 4.47 and a 4.31. And again, I'm hedging for the unofficial versus official, is night and day. There's a huge difference. And so you look at the player and, man, if the Bengals want that nickel spot shored up, they want a playmaker that's got a chip on his shoulder, that obviously played in huge games and won a national championship, made plays along that journey to a national title. Like, Ponce checks a lot of boxes. So yeah, you're right. Size outlier, but athleticism, check. Special athleticism compared to his peers, check. Playmaker, check. Plays in big games, check. Played for a coach that, for my money, might be the best in the country right now in his standards and what he holds his guys to. Like, there's a lot of reasons to like D'Angelo Ponce.
And what's interesting when you bring up Sandrestro is Sandrestro played slot in Michigan. And then now in the NFL, he's playing a little bit more mixed. He played outside quite a bit as a rookie. And the split was a little bit more even in his second year, but was still playing more outside than he did inside at 5'10", 182 is what he's listed at. And Ponce played outside in college. And because of his size, 5'8.5" versus 5'10" is getting projected inside because of the length limitation too. It's not just height for him. It's also the arm length for Ponce. But I mean, ball production is there for him, 7 interceptions. The run defense part of his game is significant. And that's where, like, the Mike Hilton comp comes from for me, is the run support, the willingness. I mean, there are going to be plays where the tackle radius is going to be an issue because of the shorter arms, or he's going to go get blown up by Markel Bell against Miami because Markel Bell is about 300 pounds heavier.
I'm fine. By the way, I'm hoping they're teammates. I wouldn't be mad at that, depending on when Markel Bell gets picked.
But against Miami, he was still really good in that game and really good in run defense outside of that play. He gave up 1 catch on 6 targets against Miami, had 3 PBUs in the national championship game, and has a lot of PBU production in addition to his career interception production. So a lot of ball disruption, a lot of good tape, elite athleticism, undersized player. Do the Bengals get past the undersized player part of this? Because D'Angelo Pons is going to have a really, really strong draft profile, especially if he's as young as I think he might be, 3 years in college, I think. Like he could still be 20, 21 years old too. I don't have a date of birth for him right now, but that would be something else that would be a factor in his favor.
Yeah. It's the other question is the NFL okay with this size? Because if so, we may see him go in the first round. Like it might happen. He might go 37th overall. He might not get there to 41. I think there's a lot of mocks that have him going to 41. If he really is the better version of Mike Sandristrow and super athletic and is going to be this playmaker that you put in the nickel that has that elite athleticism and can hold up against the run and teams view him that way, I don't even know if he makes it to 41, even with all these other corners. I just, there's a ton to like, and there's no reason. It's not like he dealt with 18 different injuries at his size either, which is obviously a factor when you talk about this. The past 3 years, obviously the past 2 were at Indiana, but the past 3 years he played in 41 games. He had a 15-game season with the Hoosiers this past year. And so he was able to stay healthy, tackled well. You mentioned the ball production. I certainly think that there's a scenario where he goes top 40 and doesn't even make it to the Bengals in round 2.
Yeah, currently 43 by consensus, which means if he's picked in the later part of the first round or the top of the second round, it shouldn't surprise anyone. That could also be said for Terrell at this point. Like I said, that the hamstring that came up for him at his pro day at Clemson, if that pushes him down, got to consider it at 41. Chris Johnson makes it. And Chris Johnson, what did you tell me before the show? Not in Daniel Jeremiah's top 50 right now?
Yeah.
But a guy that, again, is going to come out really strong for us in the pre-draft process, a guy that really should be in consideration at pick 41. And how does that impact your plans in the first round? Because
he's 40. I'm sorry. He's 40. I don't know if I saw a tweet that was Chris Johnson.
Oh,
he's 40. And
okay. Which again, right around where the Bengals pick, right? And so should be strongly considered. And the strength.
Pons is not in the top 50, which doesn't make any sense.
I mean, it could make sense. I mean, he's such a size outlier, right? Yeah. Those guys, it's tough.
And maybe that's where the Bengals view him. Terrell, by the way, and this is Daniel Jeremiah's rankings, 34th, dropped 4 spots. So, like, could he be there at 41? Like, it's not crazy in Jeremiah's rankings. So, just throwing it out there.
And of all those guys, the top guys for the draft sheet are going to be McCoy, Pons, Johnson. When all is said and done.
Really? You're spoiling it. I haven't looked. Joe get me X. I haven't looked. I'm trying to formulate everything, and then we'll look at the sheet.
Yeah, the sheet we'll talk about more with Joe Goodberry in future weeks here when we dive into some of the details on some of these guys. And he's, of course, watched many guys at these positions in addition to the PFF data that we include in the process, the production data that we include in the process, and the athletic score that we include in the process to come up with the overall scores for these guys in addition to the tape grades. But I just see this as a draft, James, where, you know, you get into round 3, you're talking about like the Keith Abneys of the world, Davison Igbinosun from Ohio State, Malik Muhammad from Texas, Devin Moore from Florida, Chandler Rivers from Duke. There are a number of guys day 2 and early day 3 that would make sense as cornerback targets as well. So really, I wouldn't be surprised by a cornerback pick anywhere from round 4 to round 5. Or sorry, round 1 to round 4, not round 4 to round 5. Absolutely not what I intended to say. They don't have a 5th round pick. Round 1 to round 4.
Yeah.
None of those would surprise me because of the depth at corner where the Bengals are picking. It seems to line up with a bunch of different corner prospects and where they're expected to be picked this year.
Don't be shocked at all if the double up. All this talk about linebacker and edge and defensive tackle and insert whatever offensive position you want to talk about. Totally could see the Bengals ending up with 2 corners or 2 defensive backs. Certainly 2 defensive backs if you include safety. I think that they may end up with 3 defensive backs, 2 corners and a safety. Would not shock me one bit.
I would be surprised if it's 2 corners in their top 4 picks, top 4 rounds. I can see the double up if it's like with the 4 round 6, round 7 picks they have.
The interesting thing would be if if a guy that Chris Johnson, right, falls for whatever reason and they have him 40th and he's still there 72, but they've taken McCoy, but they've taken McCoy. Like those things happen all the time. That happened with Barrett Carter. Like they Barrett Carter and he fell way farther than they thought he would.
But I think that also happened when they ended up picking Dylan Fairchild, and that worked out obviously for them, right? But I think that probably also happened, and they were like, we have to take Dylan Fairchild here because of the cliff. So sometimes they do paint themselves into corners a little bit too, and I think we've seen that in recent years as well. So that'll be interesting to follow here as we continue the march toward draft season here on Locked On Bengals, and we are officially in draft month, recording this in April, just a few weeks away. Until next time, that's going to do it for this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. Thanks for listening. Hoo day, and have a good one.